the privilege of founding this company within the incubator of Harvard and MIT,
Right.
like the amount of non-dilutive resources that we had access to meant that we could actually launch our app before we had to raise $1 of capital.
Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of the Entrepreneurial Minds Podcast. I'm Vaidehi Baker, your host, and today we have a very special guest with us, Megan McCormick. She is the CEO and co-founder of Oze, a fintech startup that began operations in Ghana since 2018. Welcome to the podcast, Megan.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Of course, excited to have you. I'd love for you to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Megan, and also just a brief summary of what Oze is.
Yes, so I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and really an entrepreneur focused on social issues. So for now with Oze, we're really focused on financial inclusion. So Oze is a platform that is working to close the $331 billion small business credit gap, and we do it through two products. So we have one that we're more well known for because it's a little bit more like B2C, it's really B to little b, and that's the Oze Business Management app. And it allows micro entrepreneurs, small business owners, medium enterprises to keep records, send invoices and receipts, manage their inventory, sell online, do analytics, all sorts of things.
Right.
Basically manage your business from your phone. The other side of our platform is the Oze Lending Management System, which we sell to financial institutions, MFIs, commercial banks, and it allows them to digitally and automatically originate credit to MSMEs. And so the two sides of the platform work together. You can apply for a loan through the Oze app, and then your Oze data is included in your credit score and helps you to borrow more. Or you can apply through your bank's digital infrastructure, and the bank will welcome you into the Oze community so that you can get those benefits to really grow your business. So that's what Oze does, and the journey to come to that, I never thought I'd be a tech entrepreneur. In undergrad, I was a finance and theater and performance studies major. I really thought I was going to have a career in theater, and upon graduation, joined the Peace Corps, which is really kind of the road that got us to where we are today, but then went and did some management consulting, and all of the pieces of what I picked up over time are really who makes me who I am today, but also you can see them like peeking through in Oze.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. I think kind of going back to maybe your educational background a little bit. You did an undergrad, you said, in theater as well, and then 5 years later you did an MBA. What was the reason, kind of what prompted you to do this MBA?
Yeah, so I did a dual degree, a master's in public administration and an MBA. It's, I guess, interesting and not interesting that I'm in entrepreneurship. Every single person in my family is an entrepreneur, so
Wow.
It kind of makes sense, but also I'm someone who's pretty type A, and I like to kind of follow the career ladder and like hit those markers of success. And so I had entered consulting after the Peace Corps. I had interned in consulting. They gave me an offer. I deferred my offer, went off to Guinea for 2 years, and then came back and worked in consulting. And in management consulting in the US, really after 3-4 years, they kind of expect you to go do an MBA, and they'll even pay for it.
Right.
So I went a little bit early, but not so early that it wasn't normal. And I was like, okay. I was running my business accelerator from Guinea on nights and weekends and like all of my vacation days, but I didn't really feel like I was ready to kind of jump full time into it. But going to an MBA would be like, okay, I'm not like gonna scare my parents. I'm not like veering so far off the path, but it's a good opportunity to say, okay, let me use the MBA as a transition time to get back to Africa. I thought I was gonna run my business accelerator, but during the MBA, Oze, we started working on Oze, and after graduation, I did Oze. And why I did the dual degree with the master's in public administration, I'm really grateful for it because I thought I needed it because I thought I was moving back to Guinea, where all of the public policies around small business and entrepreneurship and financial inclusion were like very nascent.
Right.
Like we felt like we were building the ecosystem, building the policy as we were working. it was only like in the mid 90s that they transitioned to like a fully open market economy. So it was still very new. But I'm lucky now because I'm in a regulated industry. And when the public like policymakers are always like, oh, you business people, I'm like, actually, like I care about the policy side. I have some expertise in the policy side. So it's a nice blend.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know you were in the US, you were brought up in the US. It's a completely different world.
Yes.
How did you end up in Guinea and what was that like?
So it really was the Peace Corps. I did this internship in consulting. They had a part of their practice that was on regional economic competitiveness.
Sure.
And I've always, even though I didn't have the words for it when I was younger, have always been interested in kind of systems change, systems design, and regional economic competitiveness work is systems thinking. And so I was like, okay, like I really want to do that work when I join full time, but like why would they ever staff me on those projects?
Right.
Like I'm a upper middle class white girl from Pennsylvania. Like how are they going to send me to do this work? I know nothing. So because on our last week of our internship, they invited in Teach for America, which is a program that places college graduates to be teachers in public schools in America. I was like, and they said we could defer and go to Teach for America. So I was like, okay, if people can go to Teach for America and come back, like, could I do the Peace Corps?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, absolutely, like super, super supportive. Peace Corps changed. At the time, you have no choice where you go. Now you apply to like a specific country, and the application process takes a whole year. And I went in for my interview, and you're supposed to like, they're testing to see if you'll be a good Peace Corps volunteer, and that's basically like, can you roll with the punches?
Yeah.
Like Peace Corps just punches you, knocks you down like every day, and so you're never supposed to like express a strong opinion. So I went in, I was like, so I would love to do economic development, but it's okay if I have to do something else. I would love Francophone Africa, but like obviously I'm open to anywhere.
Yeah.
And the lady started laughing at me and she's like, you have a degree in finance, you speak French, nobody wants to go there. Like you will be in Francophone Africa doing community economic development. So then I ended up in Guinea.
Yeah. Okay, so it actually worked out the way you wanted it to work out.
But like half we call them stage, like training class, had like majored in Spanish and thought they were going to go to Costa Rica. But
no.
But I just had a niche interest.
Okay, perfect. Megan, I'd love for you to kind of talk through your time in Guinea. I feel like it was probably very different to what you expected. So tell me more.
I think it was actually like closer to what I expected because it was like, I mean, Americans, when we think about Africa, when we picture Africa, especially that time, that was 2011.
Sure.
We had a very different perspective. It was such an exciting time to move to Africa. It was like the peak of the African rising narrative. Like it was a great time, but still like we pictured huts. We definitely pictured giraffes, which we don't have in
I feel
Guinea.
like people still picture that about Africa.
True. Now I've been exposed, and I live in Ghana now, and I always tell like my friends and family from home, like Ghana, my life in Ghana is closer to life in America in terms of what I have access to than it is to what I had in Guinea.
Sure.
So like Africa is not a monolith, and Guinea is one end of a spectrum. Ghana is towards another end of the spectrum. But I lived in a small town. I call it a town. My family calls it a village called Kindia, which is in the Basque Coast region of Guinea. I lived in a hut. I had no water, no electricity. Like went and pumped water to drink, like carried it on my head. I was lucky. The town I was in had like, the most internet cafes per capita.
Okay.
So I could get on a computer when I went and I walked 3 kilometers to the office every day. When I got to the office, I could get the internet and like send emails and things. But even those like iPhones had been in the U.S. at that point for like 4 years maybe. We didn't have mobile internet in Guinea. So I left my iPhone at home. I had in Ghana we call them yam phone, like a dumb phone.
Okay.
A Nokia brick. And just like, it was such a different life. Guinea's 98% Muslim. I grew up Catholic and in a very like Catholic, I went to Catholic schools, Christian schools. And so being in a Muslim community was really eye-opening because you realize like the differences are not real. I mean, I guess I don't want to minimize it, but like people are people. It was a French-speaking country.
Yeah.
So,
Did you know how to speak French?
so I spoke a little bit of French. I took it from first grade through to my first semester of university.
Okay.
At which point I said, when am I ever going to use this?
Yeah.
And quit. So that's a regret.
Little did you know.
Yeah, every day since for the last decade. I've been speaking French now. But you only learned French like when you got to middle school.
Sure.
So anyone who didn't have like an above middle school education only spoke local language. So that meant in my neighborhood, the women and the children all only spoke Susu. Okay. So I learned Susu. And like almost every night for 2 years, as like a 22-year-old, my social activity was like sitting on the front porch with my host dad, listening to the radio, and like chit-chatting with neighbors as they walked by. It was like such a completely different lifestyle. Really transformative. My biggest project as a Peace Corps volunteer was that with some other volunteers, with my local host organization, we launched an organization called Oze Innovate, or Dare to Innovate, which we didn't even know what an accelerator was at the time. Yeah. So we didn't call it an accelerator. Sure. We called it Dare to Innovate, the first annual conference for social entrepreneurship. But what we had designed was a human-centered design-focused accelerator to bring unemployed youth from a problem they wanted to solve in their community all the way through to a market-based solution through this like super wonderful, intense, creative 10-day process, after which they would go back to their village. Like they were coming from all across the country, right. Prototype for a month, and then come back and pitch for funding. And we funded 7 businesses.
That's amazing.
And it's so, because it's been over a decade, which is just like wild to me. But like we were all kids, and like those of us who formed it together are now like top positions in government. Like the organization still exists. It's the largest accelerator in Francophone Africa. And I was just in Guinea launching a project last year, and one of the members of Ministry of Employment and Education was like, we need to remember who Dare to Innovate is in this country. Dare to Innovate introduced us to the idea of social entrepreneurship. Right. It introduced to the country this idea that entrepreneurship could be a tool for youth employment. And so when we're like working with Dare to Innovate, like we're really working with the beginning of this movement in Guinea. And it's just so exciting, right? Because like the impact you can have on direct beneficiaries as a nonprofit is very constricted, especially when capital is low. But the effect of our alumni and our graduates, like sprinkling out across the country, like has actually transformed things for people in Guinea. And so that was really exciting. And I still go back to Guinea often. And yeah, it's kind of weird to think that for 2 years I lived in a hut with no water, no electricity, and like it didn't bother me. I don't think I could do it now. But yeah, it was like the most formative thing I've ever done.
That's incredible. And so your Peace Corps duration was the 2 years?
Yeah, so it's 3 months of training followed by 2 years of service.
Okay. And there's no choice of backing out.
There's plenty choices of backing out. Yeah, I think it's in the Peace Corps rules or something. Yeah. Like if you say you want to go home, they have to have you on a plane to America within 48 hours. Okay. So it's actually really, I guess it varies country to country, but in some countries, most people don't make it 2 years.
Yeah.
We had like my cohort was amazing, my boss was amazing, my counterpart was amazing, and most of us stayed through the 2 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's super inspiring. And what an interesting life to live in Guinea as well. I know we were having a conversation earlier and you mentioned they don't even have Uber.
Now,
so,
yeah.
No, and I guess you were in that village as well.
So back then, no smartphones. Yeah. But back then, also no Uber in the U.S. Right. So like when I was there, it was from 2011 to the tail end, 2013, 2014, was like a time of huge technological change in the U.S. because while we had smartphones before I left, there wasn't the app economy. So I came back after 2 years, and like Uber had come out, Instagram had come out, Snapchat had come out, all of the dating apps had come out. None of that existed when I left.
Of course.
Like Facebook was still something you logged into on your laptop when I left. And so it was super interesting to be like dumped back in that. And I still think like I'm not very good at social media because I missed that period where like you could just kind of test and try and learn.
Interesting. And yeah, I can imagine. I feel like everyone was in that period of social media exactly during that time.
Yeah.
And well, I guess no need to complain. I feel like social media has really taken over, so you're probably benefiting from not being super into it.
Yeah, I think those 2 years mean that I'm very comfortable, like leaving my phone
Yeah.
across the room and like reading a book.
Exactly. Tell us then what led to the founding of Oze, because I think when you were in Guinea, you talked about Dare to Innovate and working on that. How did Oze come out of that?
So right when I left Guinea is when Ebola broke out in Guinea and then spread to the rest of the region. And it was right before we were going to have our second Dare to Innovate accelerator, and we lost all of our funding. So the project could have gone with our local partners. Peace Corps pulled out of the country. And so we knew that Dare to Innovate was too important to let it end.
Yeah.
But we weren't quite sure like how we were going to manage that. So everyone had left Guinea, like all of the Peace Corps volunteers had been involved, and we all met in California. We rented an Airbnb, and we put ourselves through our own accelerator program with the design question of how might we help support entrepreneurship remotely and at scale. And so the outcome of that wasn't exactly Oze, but it was the seed that became Oze. I was doing my day job as a consultant and actually got sent to Kenya to help design Barclays Digital Bank. And I was so excited because I wanted to get back into Africa. I wanted to work on things that I felt mattered. And it was my first exposure to building tech. It was my first exposure to Fintech. We were designing a bank, though, for a feature phone. This was probably 2014, 15.
Okay.
And, oh gosh, after that, late 15. And while we were here in Kenya, Barclays made the decision to pull out of Africa. So our project was obviously canceled.
Right.
And they said, please leave the country within 24 hours so we don't have to pay for your hotel or anything anymore.
Okay.
And for me, that was kind of like the last straw with consulting. And so from Kenya, I actually applied to business school and said, okay, I want to go back to business school and I want to launch something. So I quit consulting maybe 4 or 5 months before business school, moved back into my hut in Guinea, and started working on what had come out when we had put ourselves to the accelerator program. Did a lot of testing in Guinea, did some testing in Benin, where Dare to Innovate was headquartered during the Ebola crisis, and started grad school thinking that, we were going to maybe start developing some tech in the accelerator. At MIT, I was in a program called the Legatum Fellowship for entrepreneurs in emerging markets. So every week we had like very specific training, and we were in a cohort and we were holding each other accountable. And kind of through what I learned, everything morphed and shifted. And by the time I was at my first summer, between my first 2 years of grad school, we had this idea to do some sort of app to collect financial data from entrepreneurs and have the entrepreneur be able to pay for it, have the entrepreneur be the client. So I spent my summer in Ghana, and we did our first kind of research, co-creation workshops, prototyping, and from there it's kind of become what it is today.
Interesting. But how did you end up in Ghana then? Because
it's like such a boring answer. So one of the outcomes of the testing I had done in Guinea and Benin was that internet penetration was not high enough to do anything. So we had like one veterinarian who had come through our program. We had funded him he was going to go out of his way to be a good tester. And throughout the whole summer, he wasn't able to access our prototype once because he couldn't get enough internet. It wasn't strong enough. It wouldn't load. So we're like, okay, Guinea's not ready. Also, at the time, and it still is this way, there's a big dichotomy for venture investing in the Anglophone and Francophone countries.
Right.
And we were thinking, like, at the time, too, like, there's not a lot of VC investing in Africa. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
What if they can't ask, and most of them are English speaking, like, what if they can't ask questions to my customers? What if they can't ask questions to my team? So it made sense to do Anglophone Africa. So we looked at Kenya, at Nigeria, at Ghana, and ended up picking Ghana. It was right before Fintech really popped off in Nigeria. Okay. So I think had we kind of started that a year later, it would have been hard not to pick Nigeria. Right. But I'm really glad we ended up in Ghana because, not to make stereotypes, but Ghanaians are patient. Right. And we were doing something new to market, and we were co-creating with our customers. And like we have customers that tested our first prototype in 2018 who are now still using the app.
Right.
And Ghana is a really fantastic country to launch a pan-African company from, whereas Nigeria, because the market is so big, you can end up getting sucked into just designing for Nigeria.
Right. Oh, super interesting. And is that how, at what point did you meet your co-founder?
So I met my co-founder, he also did Peace Corps.
Okay.
He was a Peace Corps volunteer in Benin. One of the things I did in Peace Corps was work with a group of volunteers to develop the entrepreneurship training curriculum for the Peace Corps.
Okay.
And so after I had left, they had invited volunteers from all over Francophone Africa to come be trained on that curriculum.
Yeah.
And he had come to that, and one of my Dare to Innovate co-founders had stayed and trained him on it. So we had the distribution list.
Okay.
So then when Ebola broke out, we were like, okay, what country are we going to go to? Who's going to run the second cohort? And we mailed that distribution list. And 2 people raised their hand, and we interviewed them both, and I ended up picking him. So I worked with him on Dare to Innovate, and then he was really excited about Oze, and so started kind of doing more Oze stuff. And we were both in the States at the time. He was working. I was in grad school. And we had there's this questionnaire. It's like 36 questions to ask your co-founder or something.
So before you get into that.
So we sat down and we did that activity.
Right.
And one of the things that was important was we're doing this from Ghana. We're not seeing a future where you get to stay in Missouri and I'm going to stay in Boston and we're going to try to do something over in Ghana. Are you committed to moving the second we have money to pay you a salary? And he's like, yes. So he even moved from 2018 to 2019 when I was still in grad school, going back and forth. He was actually living in Ghana, running things on the ground.
Okay. Yeah, I think that questionnaire is super important.
Yes.
Sometimes you get to that point where the questions, they're difficult questions, right? You don't know how you're going to take it, but the earlier you have those conversations, the better it is.
I always tell founders, when I meet early stage founders, I'm like, do you have a founder's agreement?
Right.
If you don't have a founder's agreement, go home, do this questionnaire, ask these questions, and then document it.
Right.
Because it's not going to be easy.
No.
If you're unsuccessful, you're going to have a lot of hard questions. And if you're successful, you're going to have a lot of hard questions. So, please make sure you're on the same page. And I'm not I can be pretty direct. Probably people I work with say I'm too direct. But I'm not one who dives towards the hard questions.
Sure.
So having that framework to kind of give you a permission structure to ask the questions you want to ask is also really, really helpful for people like me.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe just going towards the investment journey, the VC journey.
Yeah.
I think Oze has raised about 3.8 million to date.
It's a little bit above that now, yeah.
Okay. And so you know what you're talking about when it's fundraising related. Tell me, at what point did you really feel a shift in your startup? In the sense that you were running it the way that both of you co-founders were, right? And then now you had this VC pressure. Did you see that transition, and what was that like?
So the transition didn't come at our first check. So we did, I don't want to call it friends and family because it wasn't my family and it wasn't people I knew before, but we had a kind of angel round.
Okay.
We didn't even have the language to talk about these things in 2018. It should have been called an angel round or a pre-seed. We called it our seed round. It wasn't even $1 million. And that shift didn't come. And then COVID came.
Right.
So it was what are we all doing?
Yeah.
And then we raised our first kind of major institutional round in 2021. And that's where the pressure came, both because we had capital, but also because we had a lot of companies popping up around us.
Right.
And I knew, because I had been in it for 3 years at that point, how hard the behavior change to get an entrepreneur to adopt record keeping was.
Sure.
And that this was not a question of copying and pasting QuickBooks for a mobile first context. This was designing incentives, creating, getting into how businesses function. And we saw a lot of startups pop up here in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Cote d'Ivoire, and a lot of kind of record keeping for entrepreneurs, for small businesses popped up, and they were doing copy and paste, but they also were much more well funded than we were.
Right.
So they were blasting marketing, and so our investors were like, go, 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 go. And you find it hard because you're like, they're not gonna make it.
Yeah,
I'm sure their activation rates are god awful. it's not really, the market is not yet ready for that, but you had to be also selling that the story to VCs so that you didn't get out competed for dollars. Like, now we're just competing for revenue. We're competing for business. But during that crazy time, you were competing for VC dollars because God forbid somebody went to YC and then got $10 million. And right. So it was kind of shifted in that way. We were super lucky. Like, the privilege of founding this company within the incubator of Harvard and MIT, like the amount of non-dilutive resources that we had access to meant that we could actually launch our app before we had to raise $1 of capital. So we won pitch competitions, the money came in, and then towards the end of my second year of grad school, we went to the Rice Business Plan competition, which is in Texas, and I had never heard of it. I mean, I'd heard of Rice, obviously, but like VCs from across the country come, and we got our first actual angel investors. They had capital, and that was enough money for Dave to quit his job and move to Ghana. So that was kind of the first big step up. Was, okay, now we have other people's money. You're living there. Like, we're doing this. And we raised that first round of $700,000 on a convertible note that we raised and spent over 2 years. Like, it took so long because the market, like, it wasn't, like, one of our first angel investors, they're like, I don't know if you're going to succeed, but I studied abroad in Madagascar, and if you're wasting my money, at least you're wasting it on people who could use the jobs. Like, it was such a different, at this Rice competition, apparently, like, years before, they used to also have a nonprofit track, which doesn't make sense for a venture competition. But these investors kept coming up to me and saying, do you know they stopped the nonprofit track? And I'm like, we are an aggressively for-profit company. So it was really, like, the boom that came after COVID when, like, U.S. fintechs got overpriced and so investors were open to looking outside is nothing like the environment that we raised that first money in from 2018 to 2020.
And I know you were also at some point hiring aggressively. You said overpaying the people that came on board. What was that like, and when did you kind of take a step back?
So we had to grow. We needed people to grow. And you have two options. You have invest in engineers that can build internal automation, or invest in people that can be mechanical Turks. And we had such a full roadmap of things we were trying to do. And so every engineering hour, we would, like, plan to do internal stuff, but then we would push it towards the customer-facing stuff. And so we ended up having to, like, build big teams to do things that the product could do better itself. Everyone had money. Everyone was hiring. Everything was still kind of remote. So, like, you didn't get to meet and see. And so we made some bad hires on the leadership level, and we overhired on the junior level. And when the big thing for us, we had a channel that we thought was working. So we were using direct sales agents in Nigeria to introduce SMEs to our app. They were incentivized not on sign up, but on activation and retention. You have to be a little bit, like, you have to make a definition. So for us, activation at the time was 3 transactions, and then retention was at least a transaction every month. And they were gaming the system. They were actually using the same password for everybody that they signed up, and they were entering in the transactions for these people so that they got the activation bonus, they got the retention bonus, etc. They would then help them apply for loans, and this was our highest defaulting portfolio. Still profitable, but highest defaulting portfolio. And so the charts looked gorgeous. Like, our user growth, but then when we looked into it, we were like,
something is off.
No one's paying for upgrades, and in Ghana they were. And the average transactions per business was like 3. And you're like, what are they using this for? Are they just reading the business tips? Are they just sending invoices? Like, what's going on? And so we figured out the password thing and then quickly unraveled it. So we went in, like, the course of a month from thinking we'd figured out the channel and getting ready to replicate it across our other markets to realizing that we hadn't, and the market falling out around us. So we're like, you know what, we need to cut back. We need to do product-led growth. So now our activation rate, which we have no salespeople.
Sure.
We have a handful of customer support people. Our activation rate has never been higher. The number of businesses, net businesses signing up for activating on the app has never been higher. And our upgrade rate to paid packages has never been higher.
Yeah.
Even when we had a sales team calling day in, day out, people are discovering it through the app and paying that way. So, it's hard, right? Like, when you let people go, they need to find another job. You've gotten to know them. You care about them. When you're letting people go in a market where a lot of people were letting people go, you know that it's not tomorrow that they're going to find another job. So it was painful. Like, you feel really bad about making those mistakes, but I guess some comfort in knowing that we weren't the only ones, and that at the end of the day, my responsibility is really to our small business owners. We saw some of our competitors leave the market, and like all of the businesses lost their data. Like, they just don't have their last 2 years of records anymore. And like, we are custodians of the trust of our customers, of their data. So I need to do everything in my power to make sure that Oze lives forever. And if that means making hard employee choices, that's something that you sometimes have to do.
Yeah. And also, I think a lesson there is just knowing exactly what's happening in your organization, right? It's really difficult to do that as you're growing, but the moment you lose sight of it, there are things like this that are so easy.
You want to believe it, right? Like, when the graphs look bad, you question everything. When the graphs look good, you're like,
you don't want to
ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't ask questions. And you have to.
Yeah.
So like, the business is in, like, we spend so much less than we used to spend, but we're in such a better place than we were at that time.
That's great. And also, like, I guess it's no longer a secret that female founders are underfunded in Africa, right?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, yes, everywhere as well, yeah. And I think the stat, Africa in particular, is like last year, 2% of the funding was received by female founders, right? So did you ever relate to that? Did you ever struggle and you feel like it was because you're a female founder?
So the sad thing is that stat hasn't moved. And I remember, like, first being introduced to it in, like, 2016, 2017 in grad school. And, like, it's still 2%.
It's still 2%.
And I would complain about it to my brothers who are both, like, in the industry. And they're like, oh, no, there's women's funds now. It should be so easy. And I'm like, deep breaths. Because the stat hasn't moved. So clearly all of these female-focused funds, they're drops in the bucket. There's so many factors at play that make it hard for me to pinpoint why we've been chronically underfunded compared to other male-led startups in the space, because the sample size of female-led startups in our space is so small. So how can you say that it is because of your gender if you can't also have, like, both sides of, oh, they raised a lot and they're female, they didn't raise anything and they're female. I mean, everything is intersectional. So I don't show up in this world, especially in this market, as a female. I show up as a white female. I show up as an American white female. And so I definitely there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And oftentimes my identity as a foreigner, I feel like usurps my identity as a woman. Like, that's what you notice first is you're not from here. So I honestly don't know. I did get feedback from investors who I love, and they have a lot of money in our company, so I almost feel bad saying this out loud. But they had another one of their portfolio companies' CEO spend an hour on the phone with me and an hour on the phone with a competitor, and they were choosing between our two companies. And so at the end, they're like, okay, we decided to invest in Oze because, like, Megan really knows her stuff, and she knows her numbers and all this. But you need to be, like, much more aggressive. And I just, like, sat and looked at them. I'm like, am I your first female CEO? Because there's a word for aggressive women. They're called bitches. And I'm like, I can be aggressive. I grew up with brothers. Like, if you want me to be aggressive, I'll be aggressive. But that's not always, like, the most effective way to be a female in business, a leader of your company. So I think, everyone's learning and growing. And who knows? And you got to wake up every day and do the work. So you can't wake up every day with a chip on your shoulder, like, oh, this is harder because I'm a woman. It's easier because I'm American. It's easier because I went to Harvard. Okay. And
I think also like we were chatting over lunch. We met just a couple of days ago, and something I quickly picked up from you is like you have this innate ability to build really strong relationships, right? Whether it's your clients, your investors. I think with your clients, it's more you're integrated with the community. You know how to speak the language, so that plays a role. You said some of your investors are so close to you, you would invite them to your wedding.
Yes, if I ever get married.
If you ever get married. So there's that. How do you build that relationship? Because a lot of founders really struggle to do that, especially with their investors, and then have that like constant engagement with their investors.
I think it has to be that the investor wants it and you want it. No amount of being friendly to an investor who sees you as kind of like a number on a list is going to build a relationship there. We're super lucky. We have really great investors, some who don't have a presence on the ground, some who do have a presence on the ground, and like they're in it to win it with us. And they're also like, we're all kind of the same age. Like, even though a lot of our investors, we didn't meet in person when we first fundraised because post-COVID, everything kind of was on Zoom. We've gone out of our way to meet in person since then. I think it's like, as founders, we can put investors like up on this pedestal, right? And be like, they have all the power, they have all the money. What can I do to make them like me? It's like that boy you have a crush on, right? Like, oh, what can I do? How can I change myself for them? But like, they're also just people with KPIs to hit, with hobbies, with interests. Like, you are, both on a pedestal or both at the bottom of a pit. Like, I don't know, entrepreneurship is ups and downs. And so I think like remembering that, like, I treat them like I would treat any colleague. Like, I treat our investors like they're a member of our team, not like they're some people that I have to like bow down to.
Awesome. Okay. And is there, I guess, some of the learnings that you mentioned to kind of keep investors engaged? Were, maybe give us some learnings on that.
So since like day one, we've done monthly investment updates.
Right.
So we have a slide deck. It's populated with numbers. Like, the first couple of slides are like, what did we do this month? What are we planning for next month? How can you help?
Right.
And then numbers. So like, when things are going well, everyone knows they're going well. When things aren't going well, no one's surprised.
Right.
And like 2023, I will not lie, into 2024 was an incredibly hard year because you went from spend, grow to get profitable and make this money that you didn't count on lasting for last 2 years. So really, really hard times. And so having that transparency with our investors, sharing data each and every month, no matter how much I didn't want to, meant that we were able to raise a round when a lot of companies couldn't, because our investors knew that what we were doing and knew that it was going to work out. So that's one. Two, for our stakeholders, we have a monthly stakeholder update. So it's nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, just like, these are the things we're excited about. These are the places we'll be if you want to meet. This is the support that we're looking for, so that you're kind of always top of mind. With investors, of course, some you send it out and you get an unsubscribe immediately, and you're like, you're last. But it's just like a really good practice to get into. So I'd say those are the two big things. And then we've become so comfortable with Zoom, with team, with remote. Nothing beats in person. Nothing beats meeting over a cup of coffee. Nothing beats meeting over a glass of wine. And so when I'm traveling to different markets and I know there's investors there, then maybe invest in growth stage. And we're not going to turn to them for money for 2 years. I will say, let's go get coffee. I want to hear your thoughts on the market. I want to hear what you want to see from me in the next 2 years, so that I could one day pitch you for investment. And no one's ever said no. And actually, some of my most helpful conversations were with Series A and Series B investors in Nigeria, who helped me kind of plan out what we had to do to be successful there.
Interesting. So I think it's like, it's important to still have those conversations, even if you're not ready, even if you feel like you're not there yet, just to start building.
And not be salty if they pass. Like the event that we were at, right? I was invited by investors that have passed on Oze. I don't even know how many times. But of course, they want their portfolio companies to succeed.
Of course.
But this is such a nascent ecosystem that when one person wins, we all win.
Right.
Like, we need more companies to exit. We need more companies to have big funding rounds. Like, we need more companies to be successful. So even investors that have not invested in you, that have invested in your competitors, obviously they have to be a little bit careful with sharing information, but they're also on your side. And I think that's important not to forget it. Like, don't be shy just because they passed on you.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe just switching gears a little bit, let's just talk about some partnerships. So you talked about a major partnership that you got with a big bank.
Yes.
It took you 4 years to get there, so congratulations on
you.
that. Tell us how you got there. You know, one would almost think you would have given up a year down the line.
Yes.
So how did you make it through?
So we responded to an RFP, and I responded to the RFP almost out of a favor to another founder who wanted to co-respond to the RFP together. I read the RFP and was like, we have the capabilities to do credit scoring. We want to one day do credit scoring.
Sure.
We've never given a loan. I'm not wasting my time on this. And he's like, Megan, you promised. Now it's too late for me to find another partner. And I was like, whatever. Let me just do it. Like, I am definitely like a woman who keeps her word. He's like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And then I built relationships with that bank. At the time, we did another project with the bank, with a different department of the bank.
Right.
We did a project with UNCDF we called internally Double Up and Grow, which was getting an Express account, like a low KYC bank account, and the Oze app into the hands of young entrepreneurs.
Right.
So I was showing up at that bank all the time. I knew their colleagues. Like, they would joke and say I was almost like an employee of EchoBank. So we had those ongoing relationships. We got to the proof of concept stage, and we have really fantastic data scientists on our team. We got access to data. We trained the model, and the results were phenomenal.
Right.
In data science, there's this metric called AUC, which is area under curve, and it tells you like how good your model is at predicting. And we had 91%, to the point where our data scientist was like, "Let me run this a few more times because 91% is too strong." So then we knew that we had something, and we really wanted it. And we raised capital on the back of we won this POC. Okay. So then I had to say, I couldn't just be like, oh, this is hard, let me not do it anymore, because we had made promises to our investors. And we raised capital again on the back of winning the contract. Sure. And then even this last round was on hold until we made our first loan with them. So a lot of record-keeping startups are no longer with us. I think having this partnership is actually what gives us a competitive advantage. And I knew in the back of my head that if we wanted to do this at scale, we needed these kinds of partnerships. Right. So it was worth seeing it through.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, persistence is really important, right? And something as founders, myself as well, like I will keep following up every single week. But at some point you're just like, am I just really annoying, and should I stop? So
they can tell you, right? They can tell you stop calling me. Until they do that, keep it. And when people aren't picking up my phone calls, not responding to my text, an entrepreneur in Nigeria once told me, the deal's not done until you have them on WhatsApp. Like, if someone is only corresponding with you on email, you're actually not getting this deal. So, like, I'm WhatsApping them, I'm calling them, I'm emailing them. But then when all else fails, go to them.
See them. Yeah.
Like, nobody ignores the I'm in town, can I stop by? I have something I want to give you. Just an Oze t-shirt. Like, then you can kind of keep things going. And oftentimes in those face-to-face conversations, we had a bank we're going to work with that was kind of ghosting us a little bit. We finished commercial negotiations, and we were like, okay, to sign the contract. And they were taking months to respond. They were adding hurdles. I eventually went and met them in person. They're like, our core banking isn't ready. We need to finish it. It's not going to be till next year. So can we put this on hold till next year? And it was a lot easier for them to say that when we had the rapport than send the email kind of putting things on hold. So, again, my team is like sick of hearing it because I'm an in-office person. I'm 5 days a week in office, face-to-face. Yes. It really matters.
That's really important. I get that as well. Face-to-face, and that connection you can build with people is just unmatched. Awesome. Well, Oze is in 8 countries now. What are your next big goals for the company?
So, like many companies right now, like, we're really pushing to profitability, and we have a path to get there in the near term, and that's really exciting because I can't wait to be spending our money on growth and not other people's money, because it gives me a lot more freedom and flexibility.
Sure.
And you can make bigger bets, right? When you know enough cash is coming in the door that if you make a mistake, it's not the end of everything, then you can swing for the fences. So that's like the most exciting thing right now. We are expanding into more countries because we have these big enterprise contracts in the countries they're in.
Yes.
We also end up with them. So that's a really cool expansion plan. Since our first hire actually was an Oze coach.
Okay.
So you put in your data and there's someone you can talk to about it.
Right.
You get your dashboards, but there's someone you can call and they're running workshops. Like our first and longest employee is an Oze coach. And investors will be like, oh, that doesn't sound very scalable. And we're like, oh, well, it's not. We're just documenting everything.
Right.
So that one day we can build a model to have a robo AI coach.
Yes.
And it was always getting deprioritized because it's going to be a big thing to build. And like the business case for it is around retention and engagement,
Right.
but it's not like something people would pay extra for. So it's one of those longer term bets. And technology has just changed so much that I was at a conference, met a woman from NVIDIA. She was talking about how quickly you can roll out things with OpenAI now. And I was like, you know what, let me just bring this back to our engineering team, something that's been on the roadmap since 2018, not been touched. And because of the advancements in Gen AI, we were able to build a prototype and launch the Oze Business Coach, like AI version, in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that's coming out on iOS in the next couple of weeks and Android in the next month. And that's like really important to me because nobody started a small business to do accounting.
Right.
You need
Correct.
to get value out of your data to be like, okay, all I want to do is go to bed. I don't want to enter in expenses. And if you are not a formally trained entrepreneur, like you might not really understand what these graphs are telling you.
Sure.
You might not even know what metrics to be looking at. But now you can just chat someone like you would chat a person, and you can get customized insights about your business. So for me, that's really exciting. I'm like super excited to see what that does to engagement. And really excited to launch it.
That's super exciting, incredible. And I feel like timing also plays such a huge part in something like this, right?
It would have been a whole company in 2018 to just build that function.
Exactly.
And now it's like one engineer built a proof of concept and we're rolling it out.
It's amazing. And we're super excited to see where Oze is going in the next couple of months, years. Finally, I think last question is, where should people find you if they want to reach out to you, ask you any questions?
Yes, so my email is Meghan, Meghan, @getoze.com. Our website is getoze.com. We're on Twitter at Oze, like just OZE. So those are the best ways to reach me. I am actually intense about responding to emails. So emails don't die in my inbox. They actually get responded to. And then if you go through Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Oze app, someone from my team will also see that. And the apps are free, and they're on the App Store and the Play Store, and they're available in English and French. So if, like, the number one advice I have for business owners, I'm like, if you're not keeping digital records today, the best time to start was yesterday, but the second best time to start is today. So if you're using Excel or a notebook or doing nothing, like, it's free, like, get started, give it a try. And businesses that do that then get very excited because 1 month, 2 months, 3 months in, they actually now have access to really affordable capital. And we've seen that fuel the growth of like very, very early stage companies.
Amazing. And can people, business owners anywhere in Africa get the app?
So anywhere in Africa can get the app. To get capital, we have to have a lending partner in those countries. But that's Ghana today. That's Ghana, Nigeria, Rwanda, Guinea, and Benin.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Meghan. This was super insightful. And it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the great questions.
Of course. Hey everyone, I'm Vaidehi Tembaker, the host of the Entrepreneurial Minds Podcast. For more content like this, to learn about entrepreneurs and their journey, please subscribe to our YouTube podcast, the Entrepreneurial Minds Podcast, and follow us on Instagram on entrepreneurial.minds.podcast. Thank you very much.